So.
Right. Well, let's begin. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 90th New Social Environment. I'm Malvika, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation between Eric Fischl and Phyllis Tuchman. We're also thrilled to have the poet Valerie Schoen here, who will read to close today's program. The luminescent Phyllis Tuchman is a critic and art historian who teaches and writes about art, particularly sculpture. She is taught at Williams College, Hunter College, and the School of Visual Arts, and she is currently writing a book on the life and times of Robert Smithson. Phyllis, take it away.
Thank you, and let's get those troops out of Portland. Welcome everybody to Brooklyn Rail's Tuesday Coffee Clutch. Some of you already know the drill. I like to say a few words about the artist with whom I'm about to converse. Generally, I read about 500 words explaining why we should be celebrating he or she, or why his or her paintings or sculpture are noteworthy. Today, I'm going to make it simple. Basically, I just want to say Eric Fischl is a mensch. When we talk about the church in Sag Harbor that he and his wife, April Gornik, are transforming into an art center, you'll see for yourselves. Also, while Eric has been lauded as a painter, maker of works on paper, and printmaker, his sculptures haven't gotten as much attention. A number are really way out there figures, and today we're going to talk about some of them. So, by way of introduction, here's Eric Fischl, who's gone through all the trials and tribulations artists go through when they're starting out. He ended up on the other side, which meant he's been the subject of museum shows, books, general interest magazine articles, and even graduation ceremonies where he's delivered commencement addresses. Today, from his home and studio in Sag Harbor, he's not far from where he grew up in Long Island. Eric, welcome.
Thank you, Phyllis. It's good to be here.
Can we start with the first slide? Oh, the next. We're very lucky today because you all have the chance to go out to Sag Harbor and see this amazing group of young dancers dancing that is between the Southampton Library and the old parish, which I think is now an arts center. So we have this group. This is from one angle. And can we have the next? And here's a better angle where you don't quite see the bases. Eric, I was wondering, they seem to be dancing to the beat of a different drummer. What did you have in mind?
The excuse me. I guess you would say images of these figures dancing come from a series of journalistic photographs that the photographer Lenny Riefenstahl took in the 70s of a Nubian marriage ritual. And I was always struck by the body language, the sort of proportion, disproportion of the bodies, the sort of power of coming into being that they exude. And I was also struck by the what I came to understand as part of the ritual, which is that these eligible girls that range in age from, sort of 13 to 18 or something like that, they paint their bodies and they dance naked. And the men who are eligible husbands dress up in their sort of finest costumes and they paint their bodies, etc. And they sit around, but they are forbidden to look at the girls. And so they sit with their heads down for the entire dance. And the photos look like the girls are dancing in a way that's taunting them, flaunting, being amused, being aggressive. They go through all these different kind of body language that's very expressive. At the end of the dance, they choose their husbands. That's something that really struck me. It's amazing, but they choose their husbands, and the way they choose their husbands is they walk over to the man they want and they throw their leg over his shoulder. Only at that moment can he look up and see who's chosen him. Anyway, so that's where they come from.
Well, when you first saw Leni Riefenstahl's photographs, did you realize that you would make an artwork? And did you realize they would become sculptures?
I didn't realize they were Leni Riefenstahl's photographs till after I saw the images. And when I saw the images, I immediately was compelled by them. I've done many. I tried painting them, but that didn't work. But I've done many watercolors and began working on small sculptural figures. The sculpture feels more like what they're supposed to be. So I stuck with that. But, first came the response directly to the body language and the body forms. And then came the sort of trying to figure out how to capture that. And then sort of researching from their backstory.
One of the things that's always fascinated me about your paintings and the sculptures also is that you have a remarkable sense of the expressiveness of body language. And I don't think it's commented on too much, but you are very conscious of this yourself, I would assume.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's extremely important to me to sort of arrive at meaning through the language of the body. It's actually how I receive signals anyway. I think most of us do, but we don't necessarily pay that close attention to it. But we live in an interesting historical time because we've been trying to get rid of the body for a very long time. And, there's a way you can trace that in art that's pretty interesting. If you start with, say, Rodin, who was generally considered the last great sculptor of flesh and bone. And this was an artist that believed so much that the body was able to express itself through itself, that he would make sculptures of parts of bodies and you could feel the whole person feeling through that fragment. When you move forward into modernism, the next great sculptor is Giacometti. And in Giacometti, you have a body no longer able to express itself. It's become a body that is expressed on itself, right? It's actually a kind of anorectic a view of the body. And shortly after that, the body disappears. And when it reemerges, it comes back as reproduction. And as reproduction, it loses its sense of mortality. It loses its sense of time. Because it's infinitely reproducible. And so it flattens that aspect of it out. And so, you think of George Siegel, for example, as somebody who casts the body, or Dwayne Hansen, or, artists like that. And then the next iteration of the body is dolls, mannequins and dolls. So the body is now in a surrogate form. It's not a representation in a profound way. It's simply a sort of picture representation of something, or a playful surrogate, like playing with dolls. So I think, and that's all set against our obsession with AI and trying to sort of, get ourselves completely outside of the physical limitations that the body presents. So.
When you work with figures, do you use photographs? Do you use models? How do you get started?
Well, of course, it's completely absurd to work in a three-dimensional form from a two-dimensional source, but that's what I do. And what I like, it's a struggle, obviously, to try to find a way to capture and animate a three-dimensional form when I'm just simply looking at it from one perspective in a photograph. The difference between painting and photography, painting and sculpture, is that in painting, your hand follows your eye. In sculpture, it's not uncommon, especially when you're modeling, it's not uncommon for your eyes to move out ahead of your hands to move out ahead of your eyes. And all of a sudden you're into a realm of feeling and tactile sensation that is triggering a different set of memories than what the mind through the eye can actually recall. And so I find that a very compelling, sort of discipline to work with, where the hand is telling me what feels right before I actually see it, in a way, or before my eye confirms that, yep, that's a leg, all right, yep, And anyway, so obviously if I'm working from a photograph, I can see only one part of it, and the minute I move away from that part of it, I have to move into a different understanding of the body. I have to sort of put it together differently than were that person standing in my studio.
Are you modeling in clay? Are you using an armature?
Yeah, my early sculptures were using an armature and wet clay, but these figures, and actually figures since I work like Tumbling Woman, which I think you'll have some pictures of at some point, but 2001, 2002, they were they became wax, and so I work with a wax, an armature, and then hot wax.
And did you teach yourself how to work with an armature?
I didn't teach myself how to work with an armature. I had somebody build me an armature, so I never actually learned that. But as you can see, I did teach myself how to sculpt. So
Um,
it's like my painting. I didn't learn formally how to paint the figure, etc. I just started. So
One of the things I love about it. It's,
yeah.
yeah. One of my friends once said, when you had that fantastic show at Mary Boone with the shaped canvases,
Mm-hmm.
the friend said, oh, you used the wrong brushes. And I thought, no, you used the right brushes.
Wow. Yeah, well, if they had said that to me, I would have said, "What are the right brushes? Tell me, please." I've been wondering, what are those right brushes?
Exactly. They're this thick. Can we
The
go?
thing I find in terms of my process is that I need to create resistance in order to get at substance, and so not having a facile technique is one of the ways that resistance is created. I find, like in my watercolors, I do these watercolors with large brushes that I try to, my watercolors aren't, like realistic detail, but they're gestural in a way that I still try to make it feel like that's a hand with a muscle and bone. There's a gesture that's a realistic gesture, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm doing it with something where I'm trying to make a large thing act, properly in small forms when I need it to be small. The same with painting. I'll oftentimes not change brushes and work into a small area of detail with an oversized brush, and then I just try to make it work. So.
And you do. Can we go back to the head, the last, yeah, exactly. Eric, can you explain why, when you did apply paint, I mean, and you kind of have referred to how these dancers in the Leni Riefenstahl photographs were colored. Why did you slather on the paint like this? It looks like you threw it.
I did.
Oh.
I did. I threw it and dripped it, but
Yes.
I didn't. I didn't do it as paint. I did it as hot wax, colored hot wax. So it. I mean, in the cast, these are aqua resin casts of the waxes that are, meticulously recreated. The effect of the paint and stuff is meticulously recreated. But it's not like I have a big reason for doing it, but I have. Actually, the first sculpture I did, which we don't have a picture of, was of a woman dancing. And when I patinaed her in a sort of very, uneven patinaed surface, very sort of painterly and loose. And then I splashed a sort of white oxide on it, and so she too has this kind of thing it seems ceremonial and ritualistic in a way, and I think it brings a kind of power to the form, and and I think it's sexy, and so it's that's kind of the range I'm in.
Well, that's an amazing range. I put down in my notes, it seems to me that you might think that Nicole Eisenman was a kindred spirit. Did you see the sculpture procession at the Whitney last year?
I saw at the biennial or whatever.
Yeah,
That one,
exactly.
I saw that one. Yeah, yeah, a very large piece, right?
Multi-figures,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, and very brutal too. Yeah,
Brutal and also oddball. I mean, I think you both are not afraid to do something different.
well, that's nice to hear. I like her work, so yeah.
Um,
I think she's going for a different level of expressiveness in her sculptures than I am in mine. I still want to keep it closer to musculature and to uh, sort of flesh, and she is more brutish, sort of grosser forms. Grosser in the sense of larger forms, I think.
exactly. Can we go to Tumbling Woman, the second one? And I guess I should say to everybody listening in, they can see this at Longhouse Reserve in East Hampton, outdoors. And can we have the next? Okay, this tennis player in the act of serving, which has become a symbol of the U.S. Open. They go to it before any of the television commercials. It might be one of the most known artworks or most frequently seen artworks in the United States because of how often CBS shows it. Why do you have this guy stretched out and elongated so drastically?
Hmm.
And didn't it take a lot of guts to send to the US Open a naked figure?
I mean, to go back to something first, which is that when it was unveiled, it caused some controversy. And the TV didn't know how to handle it when they would when the US Open does its, scanning the grounds kind of thing at the beginning of every day's session. They would actually go along, and then lift up over the sculpture and go back down and continue, right? They really didn't know how to handle it. And it was my friend John McEnroe who actually insisted on them doing an interview of him standing in front of it. And once they did that and they saw that the people weren't reacting in a terrible way to it, they then began to include it on a regular basis as part of this is the thing. The thing was, it was a call for a proposal for an Arthur Ashe memorial sculpture for this area of the grounds. And I was and had always been very moved by and inspired by him for his service, not just to the greatness of the sport, but to the best that humans can offer each other in terms of moral and ethical behavior, in terms of all the work he was doing to break down all kinds of barriers, and he was an inspiring figure. And I didn't want to do a portrait of him because that didn't capture, a portrait wouldn't capture the feeling of aspiration and inspiration that I was hoping to achieve. And the thing about tennis is the serve is the only stroke in the game that is almost entirely under your control. The minute the ball is served, now you're up against all of the whatever your opponent can bring back at you, et cetera, and the battle begins. But the serve is something that's under your control, and I like that as a metaphor. It's also a gesture. It's, I think, one of the most beautiful strokes and body language, and it's clearly aspirational. I mean, it's an upward motion. It's looking to the heavens. It's, et cetera, in a way that seemed appropriate to me. I was surprised I made it to the second round because, I couldn't imagine that they would really want to put a naked figure in there. And what I told them was that we were dealing with values that were timeless and should remain timeless. And so if you put a clothes on Arthur Ashe, what are those clothes? If you put the shorty shorts on that were part of the 60s and 70s, it locks them into that time frame. What do I give them? A wooden racket, a aluminum racket? It's like all of those details actually become time specific. And I said, there's a great tradition of nude athletes going back to the javelin and the discus thrower and, wrestlers and stuff like that. It's very much a part of the Greek thing. So it's not out of place other than within our puritanical American sport culture. But other than the fact that I was never asked to do another sports figure, so it didn't catch on quite the way I hoped it would. I was sort of imagining I could do nude athletes all over the country here, but other than that, it seems like it stayed and has a kind of iconic resonance, and so I'm really proud of the piece. But.
Oh, you should be, and I love the explanation. Before we leave your sculptures, and with this soul in flight, this is a perfect opportunity in talking about Greek statues. Some of your sculptures seem more like statues. Am I just being a picky art historian and are words meaningless? Do you see them as statues?
I don't, what is it? What is the difference between sculptures?
I feel like a minimalist box is a sculpture. You would never refer to an Anthony Caro as a statue. You would never refer to an Alexander Calder Stabile as a statue. Mm-hmm. But because you work with figures, they seem much more traditional.
Uh-huh. Well, that goes without saying, actually. I mean, anyone who works with figures in the traditional mediums is dealing with that history, so, yeah.
Okay, cool. I've always wondered, I've never asked you. May we have...
Yeah, but statuary versus statue or versus memorial versus, what is there are these quality differences. I don't think of these as statuary by any means, but they're definitely statues, and in some cases, sort of achieve a memorial presence.
Oh, well, then I guess we should go backwards one moment to the tumbling woman. Mm-hmm. I mean, you got in a lot of trouble creating this as a memorial, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Aren't you astonished?
I was absolutely shocked at the pushback on this piece, yeah, and actually wounded by it. But you know, it was so misinterpreted. But you know, I've said this many times, but the complexity of 9/11 was that it was a profound, violent, murderous tragedy that had no bodies. Had 3,000 people died and no bodies. And I was struck how in a very short period of time, the language of mourning, the tragedy, turned to architecture. And there were the sort of the kind of grappling with how to understand the devastation of this murderous act. Focused on rebuilding the buildings or saving the literal footprints or making lights imitate the ghost-like memory of the buildings themselves, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody was really talking about in a way of trying to understand the human loss that happened in a very short period of time. And if you remember the media coverage, which was live, showed very briefly some of the figures that had fallen or jumped from the towers, and then censored it, self-censored it immediately. So you didn't see even that unless you saw those initial things. And if you saw the initial photos of the people falling or jumping, you knew immediately that was the way you were going to remember this thing, because there was nothing more articulately horrifying than that, because you knew that you were looking at people who made a choice between two forms of death, and we're choosing one death over another, which is a nightmare for any of us. And so I was struck by how, you know, how do you get the body back into the national mourning? How do you bring that and actually sort of refocus the way we are trying to find closure by recall of the you know, insufferable and intense vulnerability of us humans in this moment. And so I came up with this sculpture as a way of trying to deal with that. And I purposely I did it in a way that it wasn't exactly a falling figure, even though I knew people would associate it with that. I called it Tumbling Woman because it also felt like there was a kind of lateral motion to it, like she was rolling along in a way that felt to me like sagebrush. You know, I was thinking sort of untethered, ungrounded, at the whim of the winds, occasionally being stopped by something, and then the winds, you know, continuing to blow it more, was the kind of feeling that I had. And I had extended her arm, which you can see on the photograph's left side, with the hand somewhat extended out from the arm as a kind of invitation. I was hoping people would actually want to grab the hand, hold on to the hand, touch the hand, you know, make that connection. And so that was the explanation for that. But it also, the experience of it showed me how far away from our society art is. The fact is that here we had this like horrific national tragedy that was full of chaos and full of emotions. And nobody turned to the artist to ask them to help, try to understand, try to give language to, try to give shape to, try to harness the chaos in some way that doesn't lose the impact of our emotions. And the other thing was that the article in the Post that was so incredibly vicious and was the cause of it being covered up and removed shortly after the article came out, was she was so suspicious of the motives of the art world in general that she thought I was doing this simply to promote my career. That this was a sensational act meant only to promote my career. And it was that combination of stuff that made me realize the art world has moved away from its purpose, its real purpose, which is to be at the center of the culture and to be the language maker, the form maker, the forms that give order to chaos. This is what artists are gifted at. This is what we do. We know how to arrange shapes in a way that convey feeling and also are held in suspension so that people can breathe while experiencing it. And we've drifted so far away from that for so many years that we actually don't have an audience other than the trained eye of the art experts and the market systems. So
This is a good lead-in to the church project. So, Catherine, could we have the first couple of images of this is the church in Sag Harbor that you and April are transforming into an art center. Here's the church in the evening. The next image. There's something always wonderful about lit windows, just the warmth. And here, a side view of the church. And I guess the next one that shows us the interior. So, Eric, what was the impetus behind creating an art center? It seems related to what you were just talking about.
Yes, I think that ambition comes from that for sure. But a little backstory. We live in a town that has a fantastic history to it. It's a small town that's always had a kind of historical importance. Early on, it was shipbuilding and whaling industry. Later on, it was torpedo timers. It was lunar landers. It was watches and silverware, and it's always been a small town that has had an industry. And because it's an industry town where the product went out into a global market, It is a town that has always been cosmopolitan in its sense of self and in its sense of the largeness of the world. So it was right from the start a diverse and tolerant of diversity. It was a multiracial town, etc. And it is also a town that was, up until the sort of 90s, I guess, late 90s, a town that was referred to as the Unhamptons. And now it's becoming the Hamptons. And it's something that is, I'm really sorry that that's happening to it. But 3 years ago, the cinema burned down. The Sag Harbor Cinema sits in the absolute middle of the main street with an iconic neon sign, a very sort of a deco scripted sign saying Sag Harbor. And it was something that the owner was trying to sell. My wife and some people became very anxious about it, wanted to try to buy it so that it wouldn't turn into a shopping mall. And which is what the owner was trying to sell it as, that potential. And then it caught fire, which of course everybody assumed the owner had done. Turned out he didn't. But that made the urgency of buying it that much more important, even though the price was very high now for a burned out building. But my wife and the people that she was working with managed to raise the money. And in raising the money, two things struck me as significant. The first was that they raised very quickly $1 million on $50, $100, and $500 donations. And that meant that there was a broad base of people that absolutely wanted that cinema to be there. And it was important to the identity of the town. It was important to their memories of childhood there, et cetera, et cetera. So you had a broad base of support for a cultural institution. And then the other was that the big donations didn't come from billionaires. They didn't come from the people who made their money in shopping malls or restaurants or, clotheslines or, perfumes, et cetera, et cetera. The people that came in with large sums of money made their money because they were creative people successful in their field. And so they came in, they were music people, they were cinema people, they were visual arts people, et cetera, et cetera. And it was at that point that it occurred to me that maybe we could control how Sag Harbor is being gentrified. Maybe this would be a moment in time where artists took control of gentrification so that it was gentrified in their image, in the way they wanted to live in a town that was truly cultured. And so I started to think about what we would need. And I had, before I was able to buy the church, I had bought a house across the street that I had renovated as an artist's residence. And I was just starting to get that going when this church became available, which was absolutely like, oh yeah, this is really what we need here. If we're going to do any of this, we need space. We need something that's prominent in the town and that is absolutely a space that can have a lot of different artistic stuff going on in it, et cetera, et cetera. And so then it became about trying to buy this place and renovate it, which is what we've been doing for the last year and a half.
When do you think you'll have occupancy?
We're hoping for October. It depends. There's a few sort of things that are holding us up. The building, in terms of interior renovation, is almost complete, but we don't have plumbing and we don't have a gas line that will prevent us from getting a C of O until those go in. We can't open it. So.
And Eric, it's not just for painters and sculptors. I mean, do you envision it for like playwrights and composers?
Yes, I want it to be something that is, we're doing a residency program. There's 4 bedrooms that are attached to the church. We're and a little kitchen and stuff like that. We're imagining that we would do residencies of 4 people at a time for like 4 weeks or something like that. We're doing the residency not based on application, but on recommendation. We're seeking experts in their different fields to recommend people that they think would be great for it. And yes, it's it's all the disciplines that we're focused on. We purposely have renovated the place in a way that it'll grow into how it is used depending on who's using it when. So we've tried to make it as versatile as possible, with enough outlets or enough, Wi-Fi or enough ability to control light and stuff like that as we could do, and then we'll see. But we're also, going to do all different kinds of programming that is, made to, draw a bigger public, creativity workshops, things like that. My ambition is to try to separate creativity from art for the public. For the benefit of the public, I should say, that people have got it in their heads that they have to be artists in order to be creative, and they're intimidated because they say, "Oh, I'm not an artist. I mean, I can't draw a straight line." Blah blah blah. Right? The way I approach it is, as a kid, I learned to play baseball. I learned, Little League. And in Little League, you start to learn this kind of crazy game where you're holding a tool and you're supposed to hit a moving tool with a moving object with this tool, and then you're supposed to run to some place, and then hopefully you don't get caught, and et cetera. And then after a while, it's like your body begins to get control of itself, and you get a little more coordinated, and you've learned more of what the rules are, and you begin to play a little more seriously. I dropped out in Little League, but people went on into high school and they played baseball, and they were better. They got better, and some of them got good enough to go to college. And those who went to college got better and better until some of them even went on to the pros, right? And that's my point is first of all of us who played baseball, and in fact, all of us who watched their kids play baseball, learned what baseball was. They learned the rules, they learned how to actually see the game. And so even if they don't play or they gave up playing, they still appreciate it. Right? So the thing is to try to figure out how to get people to feel the same way about art. And so it's about breaking down that intimidation factor that you have to know more than you know in order to appreciate what you're looking at. So how do you get them into that? How do you get them into, honing their eyes so they can learn to see things and make distinctions about things, so that when they look at an object, they can look at it from that point of view. How do you get them to hear a certain way, or to move a certain way, to sort of feel how everything gets connected through motion and sight and sound, and ultimately to find things that that reimagine. They use their imaginations to reimagine something, and that once you get them into that comfort zone, then the art opens up to them. And that's the ambition that I would aspire for in that public experience.
It's funny the way you're phrasing it, because when I was at Yaddo, one night, two composers played Beethoven's Ninth Symphony on the piano, the two guys. And it was one of the most beautiful pieces of music I ever heard. And it wasn't an orchestra. It was just these two guys playing the piano.
When I was at Cal Arts, which was all the arts under one roof, it was funny. There was very little collaboration between the disciplines that went on when I was there, but the presence of those disciplines was amazing. It's like you'd walk into the building and the music people were doing a performance where they had set up their different instruments in different wings of the building. So you walk in and you hear the drummer doing his thing, and then you start to go down a hallway and you pick up the wind instruments. The drummer fades in the wind instruments, and then you turn a corner and now you're into some string stuff or whatever, and then a vocal thing. And it's like the whole building is becoming the container of the concert. It was fascinating. Or you'd walk into the building and there were dancers practicing, so rolling on the floor, stretching, doing this, that. Theater people were, emoting, whatever actors do, Anyway, it was totally stimulating, and I think that would be a fantastic shell to have for the church as well. That thing where you could walk in and there'd be a lot of different things going on simultaneously. It would be fabulous.
It sounds terrific. I just wanted to show a few more slides because we're getting on in time. We have one more of Black Lives Matter, which we can never say enough. And then
Let me explain the red door, by the way, before, which is that the people that work or been renovating the church, which are predominantly Hispanic, Christmas time, they did this wonderful thing where they painted this door red, and they made a Christmas tree out of lumber that was around, and put that outside as just a really sweet gesture for us and for the people walking by the church. It was a nice memory. So anyway.
Well, I hope you keep it, and it all sounds very exciting. We have a couple of images now of art fairs, which given what we've all been going through and will be going through, I mean, starting with false gods, and your painting of an art fair where nobody's looking at the art. Mm-hmm. That was your intention.
When I did my memoir, I wanted to stop it in like 1990, sort of at the height of my career. I didn't want to deal with what came after that, right? Being eclipsed, art world transforming itself into this whole other thing, et cetera. I just didn't want to deal with it. And the publishers said, no, you got to bring it up to date. And bringing it up to date meant that I actually had to look at this thing that I had, become a part of without wanting to be a contributor to that aspect of it. When I went to school, there was a difference between fame and fortune. They weren't connected. And so the ambition to be a successful artist, the ambition to be famous, all of those things were separated from whether you made money or didn't make money. There were a lot of successful artists that were still driving taxi cabs. There were artists that were teaching or just getting by, et cetera, et cetera. There wasn't, one didn't guarantee the other. And then by the 90s, that started to change, where fame and fortune were absolutely connected to each other. And the art world shifted from an art world into an art market. And that took over the whole thing. And I find that to be, deeply disturbing and depressing and angering and whatnot. But forced to look at the art world post 1990, I had to deal with all of those aspects of it. And when I finished the memoir, I thought, okay, now I've written about it. Now I'm going to show you what it really looks like.
Oh my God.
And so I had never been to art fairs before. And I started going to some art fairs and obviously taking a lot of photographs. A little bit about my process, none of the figures that you see in any of my work actually were together. They're all collaged together from all different kinds of sources over long periods of time. I'm recreating something. I'm not capturing a particular moment that actually happened. They're fictions. But anyway, so I went to art fairs to sort of get in a lot of imagery to use in the telling, and I went with a vengeance to really show how fucked up it is. And one thing I found was how it opened my paintings up. It became like a positive painting exercise for me. So I was having this like negative thoughts and having a great time solving a visual problem. The thing about art fairs is that they're absolutely artificial spaces. They're totally illogical. One cubicle shows one kind of work, and then right next to it another totally, self-canceling the first one. And it's like a kind of wild, chaotic mishmash of things that brought me as close to cubism as I had thought of. It wasn't like I thought I wanted to go that way, but the whole sort of planar construction, the whole juxtapositions of opposing forces. Of course, you then choose a slide that's more naturalistic in its spatial thing, but in some of the other ones, you can see the collapsing spaces.
The next one.
What is that one?
That's the one with the cat.
Oh yeah, yeah. Here's a good example of that. Anyway, and then you put on top of that the sort of social behavior and the just the body language, etc. It's pretty funny.
Well, it looks like with today's news that, or yesterday's news that Gavin Brown is closing, we're going to start to see some changes. Maybe there will not be an art fair every other week.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, well, they become so dependent on that and all of the organs around it, you know, where advertising was a part of it, are suffering because of that as well. So I don't know whether they'll rush to do it, to get it back, or whether they'll, in the meantime, figure out a better way of doing it. I'm sure they don't remember the time before when there wasn't art fairs and how they had to make do with other ways. But and I don't know whether we can go back. But it's not just the art fairs. The art fairs are one manifestation. It's the shifting of art from its purpose to shifting it to a commodity and to a speculative commodity market. That is the evil that we deal with. But it's been a long time coming. If we have time, an anecdote. When I was a hot young artist in the mid '80s, I was invited up to Yale to give a talk. I was flattered. Of course, I went. I gave my talk. In the Q&A, hands go up. First question was more than a question, and it was from a feminist who just shredded me, absolutely tore me apart, followed by another and another and another. I left there bleeding and bruised. I mean, it was amazing how intolerant they were of what I was doing. I thought, wow, okay. You know, I thought about it. I adjusted my thinking around it. I tried to adjust my defenses around their argument, et cetera. A few years later, I get invited back to Yale. I think, okay, I can handle this now. So I go back, I give my talk. First question's from a Marxist who tears me apart. For Marxist, you know, his Marxist critique of my bourgeois this and that, et cetera, totally, you know, whatever, followed by a deconstructionist, you know, whatever. And again, brutal. So I leave there saying, okay, that's it, I'm out of here, I'm never coming back here. This is just, I can't take this brutality. 10 years pass, they invite me back. I have short-term memory. I don't even remember the pain that I went through. So I said yes. I'm now a mature artist. I think I can handle why I do what I do. First question, I'm a little nervous. The first question is, who pays for framing? And in that moment, I saw the art world had changed. And it just went on from there. So,
Oh my God! Well, we have some other images where I wanted to talk about how your career, your corpus of works is very much about a life lived, and I don't think that gets discussed enough because you were so instrumental in the return of painting in the 80s. But if you don't mind, we'll show some of the portraits here, and then we'll have the paintings, some paintings from India and from Rome, where you see you've touched upon here. I mean, these are fantastic portraits. Movement. Unfortunately, I think you're like one of the greatest painters of dogs of all time, but we don't have any of those. But
painting
you know,
without a dog is hardly a painting, I'll tell you, man.
yeah. Well,
Every painting should have a dog in it.
especially by you. So in the end of the portraits, we're going to have the ultimate, this is not social distancing painting. And if we just go through this quickly, I mean, your career, I mean, come on, they're not 5 feet apart.
No, this was pre-pandemic, huh?
When will we ever see this again?
Right.
And now in the next, I'm just showing these very quickly. I mean, the mystery of India, the colors of India, the light of India. The next one is one of my all-time favorite paintings of yours. It's absolutely astonishing. And you have a gift for movement, for showing people dancing. And the next, I think, is we have shadows. I mean, come on, interiors. So, Eric, I love your work. I love how it is about a life lived, not just about art, which is what you've been talking about. And I guess we should throw this open to questions, if you don't mind. Oh,
I'd be more than happy to try to answer some.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. This has been a really informative talk, and I've loved sort of looking through your life and work. Our first question comes from our very own beloved publisher, Fong Bui. Fong, you should be able.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Phyllis. This is very, very serious and profound conversation. I've been learning so much from hearing from you. I remember when you came out and visited the Rail office, Eric, in 2015, just before we moved to Industry City, actually. And in fact, you brought your book, Bad Boy, your memoir, signed, and you gave it to me, and I remember reading it. Never forgot the first chapter. I think it's called Mr. Laughter.
Right.
So you don't remember anything from the afternoon leading to your opening of the Whitney, except for you've been drinking a lot. And then almost lasted go to the opening. And okay, so this is, I've been listening and anticipating to the residency, if it opened in October, indeed, which bring back to the whole incredible suburbia invention. The first suburb was invented where you were born, not far from you, probably, in Long Island.
Yeah.
Potato farm created by, of course, Abram and his son, William Levitt. That's why it's called Levittown. It was created in October 1947 to welcome, the returning GI from the war. The idea is to create and offer homogeneity, the blandness, the kind of even racial inclusivity, really. We don't remember it, but my point is that it's not that different from what fell in Soviet Union. October Revolution ended in 1923. So wherever fell in utopian creation there got implanted in America, definitely. My point is, I always think of you. I remember having just arrived to New York, being a student in the New York Studio School, went to your show, The Whitney, and remember reading John Russell's review of the show. And immediately what really occurred to me is something is incredibly wrong and disturbing about the life in the suburb as opposed to be the, utopian representation, right? Something is lurking below the surface, so utterly wrong. I'm just asking because when the Cold War ended in 91, essentially leading to September 11, another disturbance, it changes everything. In other words, when the Cold War ended, there's no longer the enemy being Soviet Union, communism, But that's, to me, that's when it really revealed more about the suburbia, this integration is falling apart, slowly. So were you really aware what you were making in the painting in the 80s, Eric, that eventually it will no longer be utopian representation of America?
As you say, I grew up in the suburbs, not in Levittown, but in a town that was, you know, a post-war, you know, vision of the idyllic way. You know, you know, everybody's lawns were kept up, everybody's houses were kept up. You know, all of the sort of symbolism of upward mobility was present, et cetera. There was an outside and an inside. And I grew up in a family that was profoundly dysfunctional, violent, and suicidal and stuff, so that the emotional truth of my life was absolutely different from what it looked like. And it was precisely that split between appearance and reality that I was trying to get at early on. But now I'm really starting to miss that. Not the violence and chaos on the inside, because we have that now on the outside. But there was something about let me back up here a second. The metaphor of heaven, hell, and the garden is pervasive in our culture.
Yeah.
And it's the idea of that includes time, in the sense that there's eternal qualities of bliss, of happiness, of joy, of well-being. There's eternal qualities of damnation, of torment, and torture, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's the garden, which is the microcosm of both the high and the low, but it's connected to time. It's temporal, so it's a fleeting thing. It's tolerable simply because it's connected to time, right? Yeah. But it's something where within that metaphor is the aspirational. There's the suburbs that I grew up in was all about upward mobility. This space was meant to be passed through. And you were either going to pass through by upward mobility, or you were going to fail and you know, be cast into a you know, impoverished and different kind of environment, right? Different kind of struggle. It made people think about the you know, where they are in a different way. And now you have suburbs, in that you have you know, people within certain economic, you know, income brackets.
Yeah.
But it's static.
Yes.
They're not going anywhere. And not only are they not going anywhere, but the kids aren't even going to surpass them. When I was a kid, it was all about how you were supposed to do better than your parents. My father never went to college. I go to college, you know, that kind of thing. The parents wanted you to be better. It was still very much connected to the kind of immigrant mentality. You know, they're one generation, two generations, three generations removed from that, but that thing of being, I'm here to get a better life for you, so that you can get a better life for your kids. It's that kind of, and that's gone, right? So now you have a different relationship to place, and you have a different relationship to time. And those are things that we need to figure out how to redefine ourselves with that. Is it something that positive values can be drawn from and created? That, you know, I mean, I don't have answers at all, but the need to believe in something that keeps you moving forward, with a sense that moving forward makes it better, is something that I think we all need. And so what is that? You know, what shape does that take right now? Anyway, I don't know. So, you know, but that's all by way of saying that as much as I hated, and I actually hate the suburbs. For me, the problem with the suburbs is that it's image based. It's people who accept the things that look like success or look like sophistication or look like, you know, other, you know, qualities, without actually being able to experience or discover or differentiate within that. And that's the part I hate. And it's something within the fantasy of what Sag Harbor could be. It's about trying to find the authenticity of creativity as opposed to the look of the creative.
Wow. Thank you. That's a very serious response. Thank you, Eric.
And a little long-winded, I know.
No, I love it. It need to be. Thank you.
No, I love that too. Thank you so much. Our next question is coming from S.A. Aguilon Mata. But I'm really excited about this because it builds on a couple other people's questions in the chat, specifically coming from Chael Delaney and a few others. S.A., you should be able to turn on your mic any moment.
Thank you.
Hey.
Yeah, S stands for Sergio there, so I'm Sergio.
Hey, Sergio.
So that was really funny, that thing about the American suburbia. I always thought that it was a little phony. When you are in the suburbs, it feels like a made-up place to look like a, you know, a place where people live, like a Hollywood studio or something like that. And I think this relates to the question here, which is a different kind of substitute, not for I guess a neighborhood, but for the body as a theme, right? So you were mentioning, you actually started the conversation saying that we are drifting away from the body, and then you talked about 9/11 and how the bodies were censored. I would assume in order to project like a more of an epic aggression, right? Just you see the monuments and the buildings falling as opposed to the body, and that would be maybe a little bit more down to earth. But I was thinking this treatment of the body and this kind of like walking away from the body is rather usual, in the sense that when we see bodies, they're so curated and edited and fixed, you know, and from the very framing, the posing, the election of which bodies are we showing. So it seems like in social media, in TV, in the news, in entertainment, in pornography, all of that is phony, like American suburbia. So it seems like this neglecting the body is rather our usual way of handling with it. And so I guess my question was, how do you in earnest approach the body as a theme, without falling into the traps of these substitutes? I don't know. Do tell me if it makes sense or not.
Okay. Are you asking if I go to prostitutes?
No, no, that's not what I'm asking.
I know, just kidding. The how to answer that? You know, the idealization of the body, which I am incapable of doing, but is something that other artists that I know and historically you've seen other artists deal with, has great value to me. I mean, I think that I don't find that a negative at all. The idealization of the body as a commercial thing that's not interesting to me at all. The models and that kind of representation, but I have seen artists who find extraordinary beauty in the body. And so I applaud them. I myself am a realist. I'm trying to get at my natural inclination in terms of receiving people in my life comes through an awareness of whether they're comfortable, how comfortable or uncomfortable they actually are in their own skin, right? I feel that in myself as well. And so there are these points where as you begin to come to the interface between your interior world and the exterior you're going to meet, you come into the flesh. And in that flesh, you greet others who are coming to you either more or less easily or more or less complicated in the way they are trying to negotiate an external world. And to me, that's where the drama is. That's where all our needs and our desires are present. And so that's where our sense of fulfillment or our sense of loss or our sense of isolation, all those things are there. And so that's where the emotions are that are generated and triggered by those, things that you're disappointed in or things that you're overwhelmed by. And, so to me, that's why I gravitate towards the body, because I gravitate towards the exchange that takes place between bodies.
Great, thank you. Our next question comes from art historian Jason Rosenfeld. Jason, you can turn your mic on now.
Thank you, Malvika, and thank you, Phyllis and Eric, for a really stimulating afternoon of discussion. I went this morning to Southampton Arts Center to check out the installation and all the other works, and I have a question about it. How the meaning of it, or how your perception of it has changed now that it's in a very different setting from how you've seen these works before. I mean, here you are confronted by this image of young, naked African girls doused with a kind of what looks like paint, and exhibited on these sort of planks or pallets in this sylvan LA that's lined by stark white images of copies of Roman emperor portraits. And at the end, there's Augustus with Cupid by his side. And, how has that, there's a frisson there, I think, definitely in this moment. So there's no textual information there that's given to anyone. You just have to experience it. But how would you talk about this installation and what you think about it as you see it today?
Yeah, well, first of all, the sculptures had been in my yard and on my property for a few years since they were cast, and they're out under trees, and there was an exhibition out here a while ago called Drive-By Art, and
Right.
where they asked artists who were in the show to bring their work close to the road so people could drive by and see it, right? And so I brought those sculptures down to the road and put them in an area where the grass grows very tall. So they look fantastic, better than I'd had them anywhere else. You know, these figures dancing in this incredible field of grass, sort of half, you know, grass up to their knees kind of thing. And it was fantastic. And then Amy Kerwin at the Southampton Art Center, having seen that, asked me if I would, you know, let her display them somewhere outdoors at the art center. And I immediately thought of the Aaaa of the Roman, you know, emperors, which is the epitome of the male gaze and male authority, and et cetera, et cetera. And of course, there is such a long-standing conversation around that topic. I thought I would provoke it a little bit further. So that's where I put them. And the way you described it didn't, you know, escape me at all. It seems quite problematic. But it's interesting, you know, the figures in and of themselves have confident power. And so they're meeting in a certain kind of confrontational equality that, again, is about sort of reassessing some of the stereotypical critique around what we see or project and what we don't. So, you know, but I haven't heard, actually, I thought I might hear more in regards to that. I haven't heard anything, so I actually have no idea how people are seeing it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. We had a number of really intriguing questions come in, but unfortunately we're rounding to that place in the clock. So our final question will come from fan favorite Deanna. Deanna, you can turn your mic on now.
Hello. Thank you, Malvika and the Rail, once again for a really stimulating noontime or midday conversation. And Mr. Fischl, I have to say, I'm really, really honored to actually have a chance to speak with you. When I was first starting out as a painter, your work was really influential to me. And so thanks for sharing all that you have been. My question is, you know, I really appreciate you talking about how much the art world has changed and is no longer really for artists or people who care about art so much. And I wonder if you have any suggestions, given your experience with the world and how it's changed in the art world, that is, and how it maybe can be returned or transformed back to a community for people who are not just celebrities and billionaires.
Let me see if I understand the question. How has the art world changed, you're saying?
Well, I understand that it's changed really in the terms of it's become a market, it's market-driven sort of speculative industry more than anything else. And I wonder if you have any ideas or suggestions as to how we can maybe move it back towards something that is more for people who seem to more genuinely care about art.
I mean, I certainly don't have any global answer to that, but there was when, you know, there was a time when there was a very tight contextual space that the art world occupied, in which small moves in it had global resonance. I'll give you an example of that. There was a time when, there was a shift from the sort of, overwrought, hyper-realistic, but fanciful narratives of the late 19th century academic art that had run its course, to a group of artists that decided that it was no longer about narratives, commonly held narratives, but was about perception. And they began to make paintings based on impressions of color and shape and stuff like that. That was an enormous shift in the purpose of art and the recontextualizing of its content. And then it moved again from that into another even more radical iteration of cubism, where it left what the world looked like altogether. And it continued along those lines. But each move that art made over the last 150 years depended on a tight context in which its movements the shift in its movement could be understood in a broader way. When like the minimalists decided that a box in the middle of the floor or a stack of something would be enough. It only would be enough if we could perceive within the rigor of that perfection, within the rigor of that geometry and that discipline, that it had an aspirational, a higher purpose to it. All of these things happened, continued to happen up till the 80s, when the 80s exploded into a kind of pluralism that could no longer contain or could hold its context, the rigidity of its context. And so part of the struggle is about trying to find a way to build a context in which meaningfulness can be perceived. And that's not going to come through the gallery system. It's not going to come through the speculative market. It's not going to come through all of the distribution systems. It's not going to come through museums. And it's not going to come through a cliche idea of an art center. There is no longer an art center. There is many centers, large and small, but there is no New York. There is no Paris before New York. There is no Vienna. Those things don't exist anymore. So in trying to figure out how to shift into a place of greater meaningfulness, we have to sort of begin to really think about context. How do we control the context of something so that the creative leaps that we make are perceptible within that? And I'll leave you all hanging with that, because I don't have the answer to that anymore either. So,
well, thank you for sharing on that. I know it's a very complicated scenario and conundrum, and I think, I'm certainly contemplating.
I think we also, I'm sorry to interrupt,
Oh,
Anna,
that's
but
fine.
I think we also have to give up the idea of genius. I think we've had a culture of genius for a long time, and it's fucking us up big time because there are not that many geniuses, and you can't decide to be a genius. So we should get rid of that idea. You just be the best you can be kind of thing and see where that falls. There are so many really good artists in this world, right? And those really good artists aren't geniuses. They're just really good artists. And we should appreciate that. And we should use them. And, you know, I personally feel we should get rid of, that artists should become local. That you should really begin to focus on local. The internet, like you go to art fairs, not art fairs, fuck art fairs, even though the same thing, go to a biennial. And what you see is you see a big exhibit of 80 countries, and there's 5 ideas. And those ideas are formal ideas. There's art in vitrines. There's art that is made out of detritus. There's art that's large format photographs, portraits, et cetera, right? There's art that is made by, gestures that look like the hand but weren't made by the hand. You know, these are like the ideas that are at this particular time would be hot, right? What you see is you see a Russian doing large format photographs of his, old pensioners, and you see an Australian doing large format portraits of his pensioners, and you see, it goes on like that, and you think, why should I care about this? I should care about my own pensioners. I should look for an American large format photographer who's doing great photographs of my pensioners, right? And I don't have to go buy or somewhere else in order to connect to the significance of what that form is bringing. And this is what we need to do. We need to be comfortable enough in our skins to stay where we're at and give back directly to our communities. And our communities, they need us. If some of us are geniuses, we'll transcend the time. It'll become something else. But we don't control that, so we should stop controlling that. What we should do is be the best artists we can be, put it directly into the community that we're very connected to and that needs us, even if they think they don't, and live our lives. So.
Great, Eric. I just want to intervene just to remind our listener and viewer that Maurice Flamel once said, intelligence is international, stupidity is national, and art is local. So.
Oh, nice. That's great. Anyway, we've talked a long time. I'm sorry.
No, it's perfect. Thank you so much. We actually have one last question that we are going to try and sneak in, if that's all right with the two of you.
Eric, what time do you have to be at the court?
I got time.
You got time?
I don't want to step all over Valerie.
On the lamb from the law. Okay, so our last question comes from David Koslow, but it will be read by yours truly. And it goes like this. From your BFA at Cal Arts in the early days, does your figuration have connections to the West Coast figurative artists, such as Rico Lebrun, Jan Stussy, and Richard Diebenkorn? We were wondering if you could speak a little bit. Yes, no, and what are your thoughts?
I never give a short answer, so.
All right.
Yes, no won't work on that one. When I was at Cal Arts, they, you know, it was 1970, painting was dead. It was declared dead by Art in America. At Cal Arts, which was, you know, the focus was on the new. We're obsessed with the new. They tolerated painting only up to a point, not by teaching its techniques or teaching its history, but by letting people do their own thing. And they encouraged you to be abstract painter because that was better, at least more contemporary than a figurative painter. They had very strong feelings because they were very much New York focused. The mainstream art was New York, and they wanted all their graduates to participate in that, go there and keep it going. So they were really down on the LA artists. Rico Lebrun was considered just ridiculous. Diebenkorn was something where they, you know, kind of were okay with the later abstractions. The San Francisco figurative groups, the Bischoffs and that whole group. I'm sorry, I'm blanking names right this moment, but they were all considered provincial. And in Chicago, the Harry Hu, that was considered provincial, right? Yeah, exactly. And you kind of, as a student, you buy into the prejudice for a while. But so I did abstract paintings at Cal Arts, and really lousy ones. It took me a long time after I got out of school, a long process to realize that where my strengths lie was in narrative and in you know, telling stories about people. And of course, once I got into figuration, then it's about learning how to paint the figure with no training. So where do you look everywhere you can to see what moves and excites, and certainly Diebenkorn was very present in that space. Joan Brown and her humor was very present in that space. Bischoff and his schmeariness was present in that space, as well as the vulgarity of the Harry Hu, the sort of radical vulgarity of the Harry Hu, the sexual content. All of those things became very influential to me. And I was also, you know, you saw it in the sculptures that I make, where I had to go back to Rodin to sort of figure out how to pull flesh and bone forward. With painting, I had to go back to Manet and Degas as well to bring in, bring that tradition forward as well. And so you know, as a student, I was not overtly affected. In fact, I tried to run away from those artists, and then of course realized how important they were to me and had to learn how to incorporate them. So.
Thank you so much. So much of what you're saying about provincialism, localism is really like resonating with me. And I'm sure as it is with like the audience.
Well, it's so ironic because you go to the galleries and all you see are the influences of the Harry Hu or the funk out of San Francisco, or the light and material stuff out of LA. You know, it's you know, Cal Arts got it wrong. That's all there is to it.
It's like the specter haunting everything.
Yeah.
So we'd love to keep you here for hours and hours. Unfortunately, we're at Poetry Hour. So at the Rail, we have a tradition of ending lunch with a poem. We used to do this when we were in the office, and wonderfully, we've been able to carry that into these digital community events. And today I'm extra thrilled to welcome the poet Valerie Schoen to the stage. But before she reads some of her works, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. Valerie Schoen is a poet, writer, performer, and author of 4 collections, remarkable because she is so young. Her 4 collections are You and Me Forever, Outside Voices Please, Hummingbird, A Party Girl, and EFG. She has performed her little poetry theater at Treefort Music Festival, the Poetry Project, and the Silent Barn. Valerie, you should be able to turn on your microphone now.
I'm very sad today. A great artist has died, a great poet. Though I never read a single one of her lines, I never heard of her name until now, upon reading the words of another poet, totally mediocre, another artist, totally mediocre, who has shared not so anonymously with the world her own sweet dedication to the great one, an artist bidding farewell to an artist, a poet's obituary. Though I will go out and I will buy a copy of one of the great poet's books, and I will fall in love with this poet, or what I think to be this great poet through the falling into of the great poet's words. I will read and read portions of this copy of this poet's work over and over to myself in silence and out loud until I have committed the words, most but not all, to memory, until I am able to recite the words, most but not all, to friends I am visiting in Denmark and in South Africa, to friends I am leaving behind in the woods of Rhode Island. I will bring this same copy of this book with me to many different cities, and I will also read other books by this great poet, but this is the one book that will continue to be the one that is most important to me. One day, and it will happen, this book, or the words of it, all of them, will slip to the back of my mind in its or their significance. It or they will slip to the back, not into completely forgotten territory, but into a place that is a bit less resonant with my present state of being. Out of no great wrongdoing, I will slowly and slowly put the book to a kind of rest. Maybe occasionally, as in once every few years or so, I will open this book up again the way an old woman frolics outside her asylum. A woman lies in a bed next to a man and thinks of the ways in which her body travels through pain, the pain of touching, the pain of speech, the pain of a memory, the pain of living against memory and living with it, of rubbing and rubbing and rubbing until the memoir appears. A woman lies in bed next to a man and thinks of the ways in which her body is here, literally and psychically. A woman lying in a bed in America is a woman lying in a farm cellar in France, and a woman lying on a bed in China is a woman lying in a cot in the Sud-Est. Her body is here as it is here everywhere today. Her body, full of remorseless self-pity, which she knows better than to share with anyone, lest they use that word pity on her, her body, able to understand what is thought and what is touch. A garden in a city could be mere hypothetical, although in thousands of instances we see how it is not. A garden in a city could be an act of resistance, and we see in 1,000 instances how it is caught between this resistance, between a daily individual struggle of self versus self. Aloe Vera is the perfect example of a warm weather plant that can thrive as an indoor plant even in a cold weather state like New York. We move the aloe from the back or the northeast of the building to the front or the southwest of the building to rehabilitate. We call ourselves rehabilitators of rehabilitating plant life. We cut apart a single leaf from the aloe, and the gel we ingest and the juice we rub on our skins, our bodies. A garden in a city that represents proof of the success of the experiment in human diversity becomes a talking point between strangers. These strangers, they are the generally and of the type who own things or are the daughters of those who own things, buildings, lots, land, all of those things which grow and grow in value, and all of this value which propagates even more value over time and in an economy and of a world that finds gardens to be overwhelmingly beautiful, by nature, otherworldly, some would even say. We are drunk, we undress each other, we send each other our thoughts through emails and occasionally still through snail mails. We are drunk as snails on rain. We wash each other. We toast each other in each other's absence. And we write to each other to tell each other that the other has been toasted, that the mail we received from another mentioning the mail that we sent to the non-other warmed our very cups and gave us cause to toast the other. We met each other once in spring, and this meeting stays with me over the course of many seasons. We will die, both of us, in a world with less and less horror of the natural, endemic variety, and more Edenic gardens that speaketh of nature. We are both these poets. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I took down so many personal notes. Wait, what was the title of that work?
This is from a new book that I'm working on called To Love an Artist. So no news on it right now, but it's a work in progress.
It's fabulous.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Valerie. And thank you, Eric and Phyllis. You were both phenomenal. Thank you for
Phyllis as well for getting.
Oh, well, Eric, you're in a class by yourself.
Thank you to all who came out today as well. You're all gems. Please join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation between art historian Suzanne Blier and artist and writer Coco Fusco. You can now turn on your microphones and say goodbye as you leave. Yeah, but thank you to both of you so much. This was great.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Beautiful, Valerie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sergio. Thank you, Jason.